Good morning, all. This is in continuation with our previous class about physiology of learning and memory, into which we have defined what is learning, what is memory, what are the various forms of learning, how do we classify the memory. Then we started discussing about various mechanisms that are involved in the process of learning and memory, of which we came to know are the three mechanisms: cellular, neural, and biochemical mechanisms. Cellular mechanism we have studied in detail. Now we continued with the next mechanism, that is the neural mechanisms, which are involved in the process of learning and memory. Brain regions which are mainly involved in the process of learning and memory includes prefrontal cortex, inferotemporal cortex, and the hippocampus. Prefrontal cortex, removal of frontal lobes in monkeys or in any of the animals. It causes delayed response to different memory tasks. Inferotemporal cortex, the lesion of this particular cortex leads to interference with the visual discrimination. Integrity of prefrontal cortex and inferotemporal cortex is required together for the performance of tasks that are relatively difficult. Thus, it appears that the neural substrate for learning are very much task specific. What is the role of hippocampus? Combined lesion of hippocampus and amygdala. That means when both hippocampus and amygdala are involved, there occurs significant amnesia than when the lesion is involving the individual structure, either hippocampus or the amygdala. Bilateral destruction of ventral hippocampus in cases of humans leads to striking deficit in short-term memory. However, working memory and remote memory remains intact, the person is capable of learning new tasks and returning pre-lesion remote memories. However, they cannot form, or the person or the patient cannot form new long-term memory. Lesion of the mammillary body or thalamus causes impairment of recent memory, where hippocampal connection with the amygdala is concerned with emotions which are related to the activity in the left parahippocampal cortex and left frontal lobe increases when they recall words, and activity in the right parahippocampal cortex and right frontal lobe increases when they recall pictures. New neurons are formed in the hippocampus in response to learning and memory, and therefore decrease in the number of new neurons formed in the hippocampus. It indicates that, or it leads to decreased hippocampal memory function or the memory production. Neural mechanism of declarative and the procedural memory. Declarative memory, it refers to the memory of events, facts, and ability to knowingly assess these particular events and facts. Integrated in medial portion of the temporal lobe, and hence bilateral medial temporal lobectomy causes loss of declarative memories or inability to form new declarative memory, but retain the procedural memory. Procedural memory, it is the ability to learn and remember new skills as well as procedures. It is integrated in different parts of the brain, which is depending on the type of task that is being learned and remembered. For example, learning and remembering new motor skills and habits required striatum or the neostriatum, motor cortex, and the cerebellum. Remembering emotional components which are associated with this task and skills require amygdala portion of the limbic system, and learning the conditioned reflexes has the requirement of cerebellum as well as the cortex. Neural mechanism for the short-term and long-term memory. Declarative memory, short-term and long-term memory. Short-term memory can be recalled for seconds to minutes, whereas newly and recently learned experience can easily be recalled. For example, before an individual dials a telephone number, the individual first sees the number and repeats it mentally till the number is dialed. Then he forgets the number quickly once he starts talking on the telephone, and this is a form of working memory. However, if the number is repeatedly being used and is an important number, it is stored in the memory for a longer duration of time and gets converted into long term. Thus, permanent storage of information is based on its importance, on its repeated use, and on whether it is associated with an important or the emotional event. For memory to become permanent, processing occurs in subcortical areas that mainly involve the hippo. Coming on to the working memory, it makes the information available for a brief period. The center for working memory is the prefrontal cortex, which has got two components: verbal component that retains the verbal memory, and the visuospatial component that retains visual as well as spatial aspect of the object. Spatial short-term memory can also be labeled. Long-term memory. Short-term memory is converted to long-term memory mainly by the three ways. The first, by repeating the process of learning frequently. Second, by adding more than one sensory modality to process of learning. For example, writing and simultaneously also hearing the newly acquired knowledge. Third way, by associating the process of particular learning with a meaningful emotional event. Hippocampus plays an important role in the long-term memory, that is, in the process of consolidation, but has got no role in the retrieval of the same long-term memory. Long-term memories are stored in various parts of the neocortex, which include visual and auditory parts of the memories are located in visual and auditory cortex respectively, and therefore the long-term memories once established can readily be recalled by association with similar events later in the life. And these events could be visual, auditory, olfactory, or the somatosensory. Intercortical transfer of memory. This particular intercortical transfer of memory is taking place through the corpus callosum, structure that connects the two cerebral hemisphere, and various commissural fibers, which include the anterior and the posterior. If these fibers are sectioned, then no memory transfer takes place between the two cortices. If an animal is shown and taught some task with one eye, whereas the other eye is kept blindfolded, then the blindfold is transferred to the other eye. The animal remembers the task and can perform it. In case the optic chiasm and the corpus callosum is cut, it cannot perform the task as it cannot remember what has been learned with the other eye. This is called the split brain, and this may be due to loss of intercortical transfer of the memory or the learned aspects. Neural mechanism of learning. Information from the somatosensory, visual, and auditory cortices. It mainly gathers at the prefrontal cortex. Prefrontal cortex causes integration of these inputs, which are related to language and mathematical ability in relation to previous experience, and hence the particular prefrontal cortex is said to be or considered as the site of working memory. New experiences are processed in the prefrontal cortex. Processed information is then transmitted to hippocampus from the prefrontal cortex, where in the hippocampus, the consolidation of information is taking place over several hours into a lasting form. Learned experience is stored in the association cortices, from where it can be retrieved whenever needed. Role of cholinergic neurons in the memory. Acetylcholine is the major neurotransmitter in the learning and memory, as well as in the other cognitive function. Cholinergic neurons are present in basal forebrain region. These cholinergic neurons from the basal forebrain region are projecting heavily to the hippocampus and to different parts of the cerebral cortex. Loss of cholinergic neuron, especially in the basal forebrain portion, causes dementia. What is dementia? It is an impairment of the memory, abstract thinking, as well as judgment. Brain areas, various brain areas, we can say, for integration of various forms of memory. For the example, the first one, explicit or the declarative memory, that is the memory about facts and events. Medial temporal loop. Short-term memory is mainly integrated in the hippocampus. Working memory, as we have already studied, the center is prefrontal cortex, and for the long-term memory, various parts of the neocortex. Implicit or the non-declarative memory, priming is mainly integrated in the neocortex. Procedural memory, which includes skills and habits, is integrated in the striatum. Associative learning, which includes the classical and operant conditioning, which involve emotional response, is integrated in the amygdala portion of the limbic system. Skeletal musculature, as it has been related with the movement, the integration is taking place in the cerebellum. Non-associative learning is involved or integrated in various reflex pathways. Mechanism underlying learning and memory. The third part, that is the biochemical mechanism. After cellular and neural mechanism, it's a biochemical mechanism. Repeated transmission of impulses along neural circuits causes permanent changes in the concerned neuron, like new protein formation in the nerve cells as well as increased RNA synthesis. Recent study proves that activation of specific gene is mainly responsible for the process of learning. Strangeness and familiarity. Stimulation of some parts of the temporal lobes causes change in interpretation of one's surrounding. For example, subject or the person feels strange in a familiar place or familiarity with the new events. And this particular ability helps the normal individual to adjust to the different environments. Inappropriate feeling of familiarity with new events or surroundings is known as deja vu phenomena. It is a French word, the deja vu phenomena, or the deja vu is basically a French word which means already seen. This phenomena may occur in normal individuals, but usually occurs as an aura that precedes the onset of temporal lobe epilepsy. Coming on to the next clinical significant part related with the memory, and that is the amnesia or impairment of the memory. There are two main forms of amnesia: retrograde and the anterograde amnesia. Let us consider one by one. Retrograde amnesia, it is a loss of memory for events that just precede the head injury or the disease. Usually, loss occurs only for the short-term memory, and it occurs commonly after the head injury. Anterograde amnesia, it is inability to recall memory or to form a new memories after event like head injuries, mental shock, or some of the disease process. Duration covered by the amnesia usually shortens with the time. That means as the time advances, the duration that is covered with the form of amnesia is goes on decreasing. It is reported for the first time by the Dr. Brenda Milner in the year 1950. Patient with the bilateral medial temporal lobectomy, which was done for the purpose of as a part of treatment for the severe epilepsy. After surgery, these patients were unable to form new declarative memory and to remember the task performed before the surgery. However, these people could learn a difficult task, perform better with repeated trials, and retain the skill over time. Different areas of the cortex are responsible for learning and memory, and therefore the degree of amnesic deficit is proportional to the amount of cortex that is being removed in injury or because of any of the disease process that is being involved. Nature of amnesia depends on the part of the cortex that is involved. This indicates the importance of the cortex or the cortical mechanism in the formation of or in the process of learning as well as memory. Cholinergic synapses, as we have said, it is the main neurons that are involved in the process of learning and memory. Cholinergic synapses are mainly involved, so amnesia can be produced in animals by injecting synaptic depolarizing blocker or diisopropyl fluorophosphates and anticholinesterase. Coming on to the very important form of memory deficit called dementia. It is a syndrome which is consisting of several intellectual inabilities like cognitive function deficit, including learning as well as memory. It is the commonest being senile dementia among all the forms of dementia that affect the cortical function. Senile dementia in the sense the dementia that is associated with the advancement in the age. Pathological dementia occurs common in neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's disease. Drug-induced dementia and alcoholic dementias are also very much common. Let us consider Alzheimer's disease in detail. It is characterized by progressive loss of short-term memory, followed by general loss of cognitive and other brain functions, the need for constant care, and eventually death. Incidence, it commonly occurs in the middle-aged as well as in the elderly people between 65 to 69 years of age. About 70% population is affected, which increases, the percentage increases as the age is advancing. In cases the person is 95 years or more, the percentage of the affected patients are 40 to 50. Pathophysiology. There is intracellularly neurofibrillary tangles made up of hyperphosphorylated forms of tau protein are formed, which bind with the microtubules, and extracellularly senile plaques are formed, having core of beta amyloid peptide called A beta peptide, surrounded by altered nerve fibers as well as reactive glial cells. That means cellularly, there is a formation of neurofibrillary tangles made up of tau protein, and extracellularly there are senile plaques, the main content of which is the beta amyloid peptide or the A beta peptide. A beta peptide are products of normal protein called amyloid precursor protein. It is a transmembrane protein, that is amyloid precursor protein is a transmembrane protein which is projecting into the extracellular fluid from all the nerve cells, and normally this particular protein is secreted from all the nerve cells. It gets hydrolyzed at 3 different sites respectively by alpha secretase. The hydrolyzation of this APP by the alpha secretase produces non-toxic peptides. But when it gets hydrolyzed by beta secretase and gamma secretase, it gives rise to production of toxic peptides, which are among which the most toxic is A beta theta 142 peptide. The toxic peptide which are being formed because of the hydrolyzation of amyloid precursor protein by this particular beta secretase and gamma secretase, they form extracellular aggregates, and these aggregates then bind to AMPA receptor and to calcium channels, because of which the calcium channel remain open for a longer duration, which increases calcium influx. Because of the excessive calcium influx, there occurs excitotoxicity, and this particularly stimulates the process of apoptosis, and there occurs the degeneration or decrease in the number of acetylcholine secreting neurons. Along with that, it also induces inflammatory response and produces intracellular tangles. These because of this inflammatory response and production of the tangles, the affected neurons or the cells, they ultimately gets destroyed or they get excessive and abnormal hydrolysis of APP results in more production of A beta protein that form the nucleotide plaque, which induce inflammatory reaction, tangle formation, oxidative damage, and cholinergic neuronal degeneration. And together, all this leads to impairment of memory, the process or the condition called as. What will be the treatment? Cerebral vasodilator stimulants and high dose of vitamin B, C, and E have beneficial effect. Trials of oral physostigmine, choline, lecithin, and cholinergic precursor and agonists have yielded some of the positive results. Coming on to the learning, that is ability to alter behavior on the basis of experience. Conditioned reflex, as we have already defined it, conditioned reflex are important type of learning. Two separate classes of reflexes are described by Ivan Petrovich Pavlov, a skillful experimental physiologist from Russia. Inborn or unconditioned reflex, acquired or the conditioned. Inborn or the unconditioned reflex is present in all normal individuals, such as superficial, deep, and visceral reflexes. Inborn in the sense the reflex is present right since the birth. It is not acquired after the birth. For example, plantar reflex, abdominal reflex, and there are so many such reflexes. Acquired is a reflex response to a stimulus that previously elicited little or no response, acquired by repeatedly pairing the stimulus with another stimulant that normally does produce the response. Acquired or conditioned reflex, it is therefore peculiar to the individual and refers to fact that certain condition must be present in if this class of response is to develop. It depends for its appearance on formation of new functional connection in the central nervous system. With this, we comes to an end of physiology of learning and memory. The next session we will be talking about another higher function, and that is physiology of language or the speech. Thank you.